Hi, everybody. Welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe. So yesterday I had an interesting thought come to me. I was showing my son Venus and Jupiter because right now they're really bright in the night sky. In fact, Jupiter is currently at opposition, which is just a way of saying it's a full Jupiter, just like we have a full moon when we're not seeing like the dark side of the moon. We see the complete light side that the sun is shining on. So that's what's going on with Jupiter. So Jupiter is bright. And I guess you don't experience opposition with like Venus and Mercury because they're closer to the sun. Like they get like really to a certain point, like they get really bright, but you don't experience full opposition. That's what I read. So with the outer planets, yes. With the inner planets, no. And people have been emailing me because it's been making the news on sites like this, Earth and Sky and space.com, but I didn't see anything too special about it necessarily. Opposition for Jupiter, it happens like once a year. So, and I didn't really see it coinciding with anything necessarily. Maybe elections, I don't know, but it like happens every year. So I haven't really been able to put together a video about that because I just don't see anything there. But I was showing my son, he's 8 years old and he's autistic, and he was just like so interested in it, which didn't surprise me because he's really interested in math and science and stuff like that. I was showing him the Google Sky Map app on my phone, and he loved that. And Jenica and I went on a drive, and I was thinking about the millennium, and I realized, and we've talked about this before on the channel, it's been a while, but we've talked about how there's going to be like this healing during the millennium. And I don't know to what extent. I'm going to read a couple key quotes. But I think that everything with the human body is going to be healed. There's not going to be disease anymore during the millennium. And I think that could include mental illness. And so I was thinking about the implications of that on my son and other people with autism. And like if suddenly, that was taken away, they would still, I believe, I don't know why they wouldn't, they would still retain that like really highly specialized knowledge that they obtained while being autistic, right? Because with autism, usually, I know that there's like a spectrum, but it seems like with any given autistic person, they get like really highly interested in like certain topics, commonly in like numbers, in science like my son, but it can be other things too. But they like almost gain like a superhuman level of intelligence or knowledge in like certain areas, or at least like beyond what most people learn about those things. So they would have that advantage in the millennium. They would have that. And at that point, they would be what nowadays what's referred to as neurotypical, or just kind of like your average normal person. But they would have like this superhuman, quote unquote, superhuman type knowledge in these areas. And that might be really helpful as we recover from the events of the Second Coming. And as we like rebuild society, advance into this new age, and their knowledge and services may be needed, because we're going to go through this really big, and we don't know how big, but there's going to be this big depopulation event. We don't have all the details about how civilization is going to move forward in the millennium. I'm of the opinion that there's going to be a lot that does survive, and that there's going to be a transition. It's not just going to be like a magical, oh, we're on this monetary system now, we're on this, or oh, this is how the economy works now, and now we're going to just abruptly shift to this. I think there's going to be just a natural transition, because that's typically how the Lord does things. And so we're still going to need people that have skills and can work in different sectors of the economy, industry, whatever. So, okay, so let's take a look at this really quick. Let's look at some of the details. The other interesting thing is that it seems that autism is on the rise. There's some debate about that, which we'll cover that in just a minute. Is it like a true increase, or is it because of like diagnostic criteria and stuff like that? Well, we'll get into that in just a minute. Okay, so first, let's go to my spreadsheet called Quotes A through Z. I have this quote in a few different places, but this is probably the easiest place to read this from. We're on row 58, which is currently the row that I have for the topic blood. And we're going to read from Elder Bruce R. McConkey's Millennial Messiah. Okay, we're not going to read this whole thing, but okay. So some mortals have been translated. And he's referring to, at this point, some mortals, meaning like John the Revelator, the three Nephites, and possibly others. In this state, they are not subject to sorrow or to disease or to death. No longer does blood, the life-giving element of our present mortality, flow in their veins. Procreation ceases. Just for them, you guys, not for us during the millennium, because we're going to be changed like they are. If they then had children, their offspring would be denied a mortal probation, which all worthy spirits must receive in due course. They have power to move and live in both the mortal and unseen sphere. All translated beings undergo another change in their bodies when they gain full immortality or resurrection. This change is equivalent to a resurrection. All mortals after death are also resurrected. In the resurrected state, they are immortal and eternal in nature, and those among them who are privileged to live in the family unit have spirit children. Okay, now, this is the key part. Millennial man will live in a state akin to translation. His body will be changed so that it is no longer subject to disease, which that's kind of broad, but I think that could include mental illness as well. I really think that. Or death as we know it. Although he will be changed in the twinkling of an eye to full immortality when he is 100 years of age. Okay, so people that are currently translated, they're essentially in the same state. It's just that it seems like those that are currently translated are going to live all the way to the second coming rather than just restricted to 100 years. And it makes sense that they can't procreate anymore because the three Nephites, they had their time to have families, to get married, have families, have children, but we can't have them just like having families for, over over 1,000 years, marrying new wives, having more children. So it doesn't really make sense, does it? So it makes sense that their procreation would cease. But in the millennium, it's still mortality. This whole mortal process doesn't end until the earth is celestialized at the end of the millennium, at the very end. So the next 1,000 years, it's still going to be mortality, but the earth is going to change to a paradisiacal state. Everything's going to revert back to the way it was in the Garden of Eden, with the exception that we will procreate. Whereas Adam and Eve, they did not until the fall, but we will still have children and still be in mortality. We can still sin. It's still a probationary state. Okay. But no disease or death as we know it. You live until you're 100 years old. Then you're changed in the twinkling of an eye from mortality to resurrected immortality. Okay. And then it goes on to talk about that in the millennium, there's going to be resurrected people, and then there's going to be everybody else, not just members of the church, but everybody on earth, a member of the church or not, who are going to be in this quickened, translated, transfigured state. He says right here, changed or quickened or transfigured or translated, words fail to describe their state, and so on. Okay. And we're not going to have blood, just to make it clear, because you may have been like, well, this is just talking about like the three Nephites and John the Revelator. He says that they don't have blood. No, it's going to be us too. I'm just going to read this quote really quick. This is also from the Millennial Messiah, but I have quotes from Joseph Fielding Smith, and I think a couple others that back this up. He says, Isaiah gives us these poetically phrased particulars about animal life during the millennium. The wolf and the lamb shall feed together, he says, and the lion shall eat straw like the bullock. Implicit in this pronouncement is the fact that man, not just animals, not just previously translated people, man and all forms of life will be vegetarians in the coming day. The eating of meat will cease because, for one thing, death as we know it ceases. There shall be no shedding of blood because man and beast are changed, quickened, and blood no longer flows in their veins. Excuse me. Okay, so physiologically, there's going to be a pretty radical change that comes upon us and all the rest of, creatures on planet Earth. So if it's going to go that far to where we don't have blood anymore, then I think that mental illness is going to be a thing of the past. So let's get back to the main idea. So with that being said, let's talk about autism. This is a part of the CDC's website for autism spectrum disorder. That's what it's currently called. They used to have different... They used to look at autism differently than they do now. So, for example, they don't have Asperger's anymore. There's this autism spectrum, and I'm not really up to speed with it. I just know that they changed it. But anyway, this is talking about the prevalence of autism, and they have this table right here. And it's every year from the year 2000 to 2020. And let's just pay attention to this column right here to the right. So this is how many children with autism per X number of people. So in the year 2000, it was 1 in 150 children that had it. The same thing in 2002. And then it was 1 in 125 in 2004. And the number keeps going down and down and down. And now in 2020, it's 1 in 36. And so naturally the question arises, what's going on here? Why are we having more and more children with autism? What's going on? Okay, we're going to look at a paper that's on JAMA Network. I didn't know what that was until I, prepared this video. JAMA Network is a monthly open access medical journal published by the American Medical Association covering all aspects of the biomedical sciences. Okay, so that's what it is. It's a journal. And there was a new study done. This is Autism Diagnosis Among U.S. Children and Adults, 2011 to 2022. And they came up with some ideas as to why we're seeing more autism, or at least more people being diagnosed with autism. I don't really care to get into the debate or the controversy or the different theories about this. I'm just going to read what they say. You believe whatever you want. Okay, so conclusions and relevance. In this cross-sectional study of children and adults in the U.S., ASD diagnosis rates increased substantially between 2011 and 2022. Hypothesized reasons for prevalence increases include, so here's their different reasons why they think it's happening. Developmental screening practices. So I guess that would be with like pediatricians. Like I remember there was like a screening that our pediatrician did when our son was born. And so that's how we found out that he had autism. So developmental screening practices, diagnosis definitions. It's like how we even just define or diagnose autism, whereas they may not have done that before in the same way. Policies and environmental factors, as well as increased advocacy and education. So I haven't looked at all the details of this. I'm not going to do that in depth of a study. But on the surface, it seems like they think it's mostly because of raised awareness, more and better screening practices, changes in the way that we diagnose it. They do include environmental factors, so that may be something to look into. So it may not just be the way that we catch it or identify it, but there could be something in the environment or something that we're not aware of that's affecting it. I wouldn't be surprised if that is the case. And then let's move on. This is a website called embraceautism.com. There was some more that I wanted to read from here. While some autistic people have an intellectual disability, or ID, most autistic people have average to above average intelligence, but often demonstrate a significant unevenness in abilities. Yeah. And I'm sure if you know anybody that has autism, you see that. It's like with our son, for example, he's very smart. He learned how to read by himself by watching YouTube. And that's not an exaggeration. There's one day that I walked in on him and he was watching a YouTube video and he was like reading. And I was like, what? Like I saw him. It looked like he was like reading. I saw him looking at the screen and then I went and looked at the screen and he was in fact reading without the video like saying it for him. He was reading himself and he taught himself how to read by watching YouTube. And he's really good at math, but he's very bad with his verbal communication. And then there's other deficits as well. So, okay. So while we have our challenges and there are things we aren't as good as, autistic people typically excel in verbal tasks as well as memory tasks that rely heavily on memory. The next section is disorder of high intelligence. Some autistic people score very high on intelligence tests, and a greater prevalence of people with IQs over 140, which is gifted/genius level, have been found among autistic people. In fact, a link has been found between autism, high intelligence, and giftedness. Consequently, some came to call autism a quote-unquote disorder of high intelligence. Estimated rates of intellectual giftedness in autistic children are 0.7 to 2% compared to up to 1% in the general public. And then it goes over the concept of twice exceptional. I'm not really going to go into that too much, but I just want to focus in on this part right here. 7 traits common to both autistic children without ID, which is, what was that again? It's a intellectual disability. So autistic people without ID and gifted children. So you take a neurotypical gifted child, just like a regular person that doesn't have a mental illness or anything like that. You take gifted children, you take autistic children that do not have ID, and these are the 7 things that they share in common. And we're just going to focus on 1 through 3 and 5 through 7 because that's what pertains to this video. Sorry, I should have zoomed in. Okay, number 1, verbal fluency or precocity. Number 2, excellent memory. Number 3, absorbing interest in a niche topic and may acquire significant factual information about it. Number 4, may frustrate peers with their limitless talk. I don't know if you've been the subject of this before. May frustrate peers with their limitless talk about their passionate interests. And I never get frustrated. It is kind of hard sometimes to bear, but number 6, fascination with letters or numbers and enjoys memorizing factual information at an early age, which that's exactly what our son does. He was talking about planets and their temperature last night, and he had like all these like facts memorized that I was just like, when did you have the time to memorize that? But he did at some point. And then number 7, may ask endless questions or give such extensive specific responses to questions that it seems they're unable to stop. Okay, so with all that being said, let's just review this concept again. So we have this population of people, okay, that not all of them necessarily, but some of them become very smart, very intelligent, very interested, and even expert in niche topics, okay? And it seems like it's rising, regardless of the reason why. We've always had, I'm sure we've always had autistic people, and I'm sure that some of it is because of better screening practices and identifying it earlier. But I'm willing to bet that that can't account for all of this. I mean, maybe it could, but I think that there probably is something environmental or otherwise going on. So if it's something aside from just screening and diagnosis, if it's something else, maybe the Lord in a way is preparing for this transition from this old world into the millennial world. And maybe this is part of it. Maybe because we're going to be missing so many people, the wicked. It doesn't mean that they're like all completely wicked. They still participate in society. They still have jobs. They're still experts and leaders of industry and stuff like that. Like a lot of them are going to be gone. So it may be that we're going to have people that are able to step up and fill in those positions that are now vacant. Does that make sense? And so you may have an advantage if you're like really intelligent and you know a lot about history, or you know a lot about economics, or you're very good at math or some field of science. Does it make sense? It's gonna be, if you have someone in your family, or someone that has autism and they're very intelligent in a certain area, just imagine what things would be like if all of a sudden they were cured and they didn't have autism anymore. And the advantage that they would have going forward and the things that they would be capable of. They already are very capable, but just imagine if you took the autism away and they were left with that knowledge that they've acquired. I'm just kind of playing around with this idea. I don't know. I guess we'll see how things actually go once we get there. But I think I'm onto something. So anyway, that's going to be it for this one. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.